Hello, welcome everybody to the AI, Metaverse and All Else panel here at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Hello to everyone online too. I hope you can see me and our wonderful panelists here today. My name is Pablo Martinez. I work at the Center for the Governance of Change at IE University in Madrid, Spain. We research the societal, the political, the economic implications of these new so-called emerging and disruptive technologies. Unfortunately, the chair of our center, Mr. Manuel Muñiz, could not be here today with us, so I will be moderating this panel today. First of all, also thank you to the wonderful ADF team for putting together such a great event, as well as the Ambassador Cargos and Ambassador Okem for their wonderful invitation to co-organize this panel with IE University, and as well to the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Turkish Embassy in Spain for all of their help as well. We have a special surprise for us and for the audience as well. We're going to actually enter the metaverse before starting our discussion. So I invite you all to grab your VR goggles and see what it's like. So I don't know about you guys, but I can see myself. Or not.
Nope. Not yet.
We're not supposed to move our hands a lot.
Yeah. I cannot.
I don't know if the audience can see, but we're in the metaverse.
I don't know. Can you see me? I cannot confirm that.
Can everybody see themselves?
No. By the way, my compliments to the ADF. This is the first talk about the metaverse where they actually brought us into the metaverse, so well done to Turkey.
I heard that some of the audience were planning to run away after we wear our goggles. Hopefully they are there, right? No? You ran away already? We don't see you, so hopefully you're there, right? Are we looking like clowns right now? I'm pretty sure not.
I'm pretty sure we are.
Yeah, really?
Can you see me waving?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, great.
And
We
have a view of a beautiful night sky and a twirling icon for the ADF.
And a proper amphitheater.
Proper amphitheater. Only torsos, though.
My left, I don't know about the rest of you, to the camera. Do you see the camera over there where
We
I'm?
have a beautiful planet, right?
Yeah.
We look at the planet.
Smile. And wave. Did we get some good shots? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you. Wow. That was quite an experience. For the rest of the panelists, I think we can get rid of our goggles now. Well, that was a great introduction to our session. So without further ado, also due to time constraints, I'm going to introduce our panelists here today and thank them for sure for their time. We have Ms. Sim Ann, who's a Senior Minister of State at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at Singapore. Welcome. We have Mr. Ali Taha Koç. I learned how to pronounce that in Turkish a few minutes ago. So
thank you very much.
He's the head of the Digital Transformation Office at the Presidency of Turkey. Mr. Glenn Gilmore, he's a tech analyst and influencer from the US. Welcome. Mr. Çağlayan Çetin, the president of the Trendino Group here in Turkey. Welcome. And last but not least, Mr. Gaspar Rastel. He's the Secretary General for the Slovenian Commission for UNESCO, for the group of the International Research Center on Artificial Intelligence. Welcome, everyone. So let's get right into the topic of the metaverse and this word we've been hearing around for the past few months, maybe years. This new internet, this Web 3.0, the next era of the internet. This is a new domain that affects, especially in a lot of sectors that the center itself researches. And seeing this variety of profiles, we will not only cover the big lines for the audience here today and the audience online, but also kind of cover the geopolitical, the business side, the e-commerce side, as well as the societal implications of this new technology. Feel free to respond to each other on the different topics. I can imagine you're well aware to respond to each other. And then we'll have a quick Q&A from the audience who wants to participate and ask their questions to our panelists. So the metaverse, I'm going to start with Mr. Glenn Gilmore, who I can't think of a better person to introduce the topic. We're meant to, as we were talking before, socialize. We're meant to work after the pandemic, this idea of remote work. We're meant to play games, to shop online. We're meant to do virtually anything that we can do in the physical world. So in terms of the metaverse and its implications, what can we imagine or have for society nowadays?
What we can imagine is to have a better understanding of how everyone lives. And my first introduction to the metaverse was when the New York Times and Google sent out 1 million boxes that you put your phone in, and you could have an experience like what we had. And they told a story of refugees. And the first time I put this box on and had that virtual experience, I was in the back of a pickup truck with refugees who were kids, who are now being victimized again, going out to fields and working as cheap labor. We've all become too jaded. We've all lost some of our humanity, and I believe that virtual reality and the metaverse will help bring it back. We're talking about diplomacy. I expect in the next generation we will see the great peacemakers in the metaverse, and that's my hope at least.
For sure. And how do you think, in terms of these experiences, how can it transform the way we live today, or the way we communicate, we work, we pay?
It's become a matter of necessity with COVID. Suddenly telemedicine, working from home, and on a flat screen doesn't just work the way we as humans work. We want connectivity. An immersive world where I get to see you gesture, I get to see your expressions, and we can even walk while a conversation is taking place to a side area and have our own conversation. It restores some of that humanity. So I think as a matter of necessity, we'll have to do it. But I think it's going to create a whole new world of opportunity in terms of creativity, of collaboration. And my hope is that we bridge the digital divide to make sure that the youngest people in refugee camps and other places have access to it so they can share their experience, because I know that's where the magic will happen.
And moving into the more, maybe the governmental or at the ministry level, how are your governments in Turkey and Singapore respectively working towards integrating this technology into their day-to-day?
Well, let me share a perspective from Singapore. Singapore has a few challenges that we're trying to resolve. First, we have an aging population. And number two, we are very manpower constrained. So when it comes to delivering services for our citizens, we have to meet expectations which are growing, but at the same time handle or take into account the fact that there are these constraints in terms of manpower. So this is the reason why we are looking at digitalization, technology, looking at AI as ways for us to continue delivering high-quality public services, while at the same time taking care of the fact that we are resource constrained. And I think this is especially important because we always believe in being a very open and interconnected economy. And we would very much like to ensure that we have the use cases for deploying the kind of very exciting technology that we seek. And while we recognize that there are immense benefits to be brought about by these technologies which maximize productivity, at the same time we want to also develop some protections around data, around ethics that will give the public confidence to use these technologies. So we have published and updated a framework for data as well as AI ethics that's developed side by side with the private sector. And we are also, as a government, investing heavily in AI-related research. We need to be a government that understands the technology that we're both using as well as regulating. So this is also the reason why some of our government-sponsored public services have also been using these technologies. And ultimately, our approach is one that is sector-based rather than one that is technology-centric. Just now I mentioned use cases, so being able to demonstrate the usefulness is very important, I think, in terms of our approach in using these technologies. And where there might not be a regulatory framework that is appropriate yet, what we do is to adopt a sandbox approach so that there can be some experimentation before we put in place the regulation in order to make sure that players are on an even playing field and that ultimately the public can benefit.
It's interesting you mentioned the ethics and AI regulations because we're actually going to cover it with the expert who just actually in November published the UNESCO Ethics and AI kind of framework. So we'll cover it later on. But please, Mr.
Yeah,
Koç.
so if you look at the internet era, in 1990s we started with we were introduced to the internet. And currently, if you look at the population around the world, at least we spend 7 hours of our time in internet. And according to Gartner, what we look at is 2026, according to Gartner as well. So 25% of the people are planning to use Metaverse in at least 1 hour a day. So it's going to be a big consumption environment. So all the people, every companies, giant companies are trying to get in. But the problem is currently is, if you look at the internet era, we start with Web 1.0, Web 2.0, right now we are talking about Web 3.0, but the KPIs change from the quality of service to quality of experience. So right now, previously what we are doing is because of the content creator and content consumers are not interacting with each other. So that's the reason that we are looking for the quality of service. But with Web 3.0, with the Metaverse environment, we started to interact. So that's the reason that we want to have the quality of experience. So then the regulations becomes harder because the experience is not a unique experience for you is different than experience for me is different. So that's the reason that the regulation-wise it's going to be a little bit a big problem. But overall, what we think about is in order to regulate a system, first of all, we need to define it. Currently, we cannot perfectly define the metaverse. We can think about it's a beyond universe, but is it really a beyond universe? No, I think it's not, because in order to be a universe, you need to have the feelings, because the experience comes with the feelings. For example, let's talk about it. So if I wanted to have a hike to a mountain, I like hiking, so I just want to feel the raindrops on my skin. But in a metaverse environment, I cannot feel it. For example, if I get into a roller coaster, what's going to happen? I just want to feel the adrenaline and the rush. But currently, what happens is a visual reference only is not good enough to have this experience. So, say the truth that it is a new world. Everybody's trying to open up their stores. The concerts are going to be there. The meetings are going to be there. There are some use cases. But the meaning of the metaverse is not well defined yet, or the killer application that we call is not well defined yet. We are going to have this kind of conversations with our avatars, but this is just the early age of internet-like. So in the early age of internet, we have 64K modems with sounds. It is something like that. We have Web 3.0 starting point right now. So that's the reason that regulating this kind of technologies as early as possible is not a good thing. So we want to let all the companies around the world to come up with their apps and the technology, so we're going to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm sure Glenn can bounce onto this, but the idea is that it's ongoing technology, right? It's supposed to be, they're supposed to create suits out of it that have sensors and all over, so that you can have exactly that experience of going on a hike or touching water. But I don't know if Glenn wants to continue on that.
Certainly there are haptic suits, and so that you can feel certain things. And they're also looking at having devices that will have olfactory, you can have a sense of smell. Will it ever be like in real life? Perhaps it will, because technology moves so incredibly fast. We're still going to want to have that in real life experience, but virtual reality, you will have the touching of a raindrop, because they're already working on those technology, and they have some degree of haptics, but touching a raindrop, I believe that we'll have that sensation very shortly, because technology moves much faster than we can even imagine.
Exactly. So kind of going into the geopolitical aspect of this panel, and as well as the diplomatic, as this forum's topic covers, you mentioned how states already want to get into the metaverse. It's kind of one of their objectives. And we're seeing nowadays the competition between state and non-state actors. GAFAM companies also kind of lead the way in that sense. So I have a global kind of question to you all. How will this technology affect the balance of power between state and non-state actors that we can see to this day with regulation by proper countries on technological companies?
So, go ahead.
I had a conversation with Michael O'Hurley, who's one of the delegates from Ireland who's here, and he mentioned just about Greta Thunberg, this young person who has become the conscience of sustainability of climate action. And I think one of the exciting things about the metaverse is that it will be an equalizer in some ways. It will bring disability inclusion. It will bring inclusion, digital inclusion, if we provide the resources to make it happen. And I think when we talk about new ideas and innovation, we should be keen to listen in the metaverse, just as within social media. I teach about social media marketing at a university. One of the key things is to always listen in that space, because that's where you get the interaction that helps you advance so many goals.
I think here the important thing will be regulation as well, though. I mean, one thing of virtual reality is obviously about breaking barriers. You know, when you want to travel in the virtual reality space, will you need a visa or not? You know, if you buy something in the virtual reality world, do you have to pay customs or not? There's all these other regulatory frameworks underneath it, I think, that have to be adapted to make the experience wholesome.
And to what level, kind of bringing in the UNESCO recommendations, to what level do you think companies going to integrate those recommendations that you just published months ago?
Yes. Here I would like to say, if we look also at the geopolitical impact of such developments, and if I'm now representing not the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization per se, because I'm working for the national counterpart for the National Commission of Slovenia for UNESCO. Here it says that I'm also some governmental focal point. That's a mandate that I have from our government, representing the first international research center on AI under the auspices of UNESCO, which was established also in November last year at the General Conference. But if I'm talking about such conglomerations like the United Nations system, which was, and hopefully that we will come back to the leading role of diplomacy once again after such wars like we are experiencing now in Europe, hopefully that diplomacy will be in the lead again, because such a system was established after the Second World War in 1945, and with the biggest purpose to reach out for common peace on this world. And such an organization established 70 years ago, or more than 70 years ago, these are old and big bodies which work very slow. However, UNESCO also in the field when we are looking at emerging technologies, tries to, because UNESCO is not only World Heritage and Cultural Heritage, but it's about education, but it has also one big sector dealing about social and human sciences, as well as communication and communications. And here I can see that we started, for example, 10 years ago with so-called open educational resources, which are also based on emerging technologies, and of course UNESCO reaching out to the entire world. And when we are looking at Metaverse now, on the other hand, which is in its humble beginning, starting phase only. Glenn said, yes, technology is developing in a fast way that we cannot imagine or we cannot follow even. However, it's a starting phase, and we will still see how fast it will adopt parts of the world. And it could take years, it could take also decades. However, UNESCO tries, and you mentioned already the so-called UNESCO recommendation on the ethics in AI. That's the first global standard-setting instrument in this field. Okay, other organizations are coming up now, also the EU or the European Commission. The International Telecommunication Union tries to adopt some similar recommendations in this field. And here UNESCO decided to approach on a very inclusive way. And at this time, still, this was a process of 2 years, cooperating all countries in the world, also leading countries like China. US is a little excluded at the moment, unfortunately, but also the Russian Federation and India, which sometimes do not find the common way of discussing at the same table. It was adopted by all those leading powers and by all countries in the world as a first instrument like this. And this is probably a way how to, and when we talk about, I don't know, big mega companies which will also very much influence this, and hopefully Facebook is not, with this meta development, is not looking for a monopolization of one company in this development. However, we will have to look at this inclusive approach, and here such an organization as UNESCO can play an important role, because it's taking care of also developing areas in the world and how to include them in such developments.
So I'm redirecting this question to Ms. Anne and Mr. Koç. Were you aware of these recommendations? Do you think it's something plausible inside your governments, or you had your own set of rules in terms of the use of AI for your government services?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I just want to say that the metaverse is just a name right now. It can be A-verse, B-verse, C-verse. So as a government, what we need to be open to all of the verses. So that's the reason that we are not supposed to stick with only one company, because it's not going to be good for all the people around. So we are just going to be open to all the verses.
Absolutely.
Anybody can create their own verses. So that's another thing, So overall, all the rules are designed for a universe or the world.
Exactly.
But right now we have multiple verses. So what about the regulations or the rules are going to be? So that's another biggest problem. And then also what we think about at the beginning of this metaverse environment is going to be reskilling to all the people around the world. Because everybody needs to have, with the digitalization, they're going to lose their jobs most probably, or they need to be more talented. So with this kind of environment, we're going to bring this gap, so then everybody can get some training with the new skills, such a way that all the public institutions are going to be used around the world, such a way that we are going to retrain people to get used to this kind of technologies. Otherwise, it's going to be their jobs or their lifestyle is going to be obsolete. For Turkey, last year we published our AI strategy, which is going to cover 2021 and 2025. And in this strategy, we focus a lot on the ethics of the AI. Because what happened is, the problem with, for example, like autonomous driving, right? So if there's an accident, who's going to be the responsible? Driver, the engineer who builds the system, or the data collector, or who?
Or even a part of the car who built the car.
And also what happened is, according, if this happens in Turkey, but the algorithm or this artificial intelligence algorithm is built in the United States, which laws are going to be effective? So this kind of question needs to be asked and needs to be answered as well. But currently, we cannot find a clear answer for these questions. But overall, with all the academia and all the with our partners, we are trying to answer, but there needs to be a global, uniform rule saying that if AI is going to be like that, currently it's an old black box. We don't know what is inside. As all of us know, in an AI system, if garbage gets in, garbage gets out. So, but overall, what is inside, we don't know what is going on. So we are talking about the responsible AI in this respect. So all the companies who produce their AI algorithms or systems needs to justify how good it is working or how bad it is working.
So clearly there's some kind of AI strategy in your government as well, and you mentioned as well, Ms. Ann, in Singapore. Moving on to the retail or the e-commerce business side of this technology, there's this idea of switching from the online to offline model, being that you order, you try on the clothes, you buy online, but then you receive it physically at your home. This, of course, eliminates all the traditional costs of prototyping or the mannequins or the coat hangers, the clothes hangers, sorry, which we see already in the metaverse. We've seen how companies, retail companies or brands like Nike, Gucci, Zara have been in there. So I want to ask Mr. Chetin, how is this sector changing and how can the metaverse help?
Look, I mean, first of all, obviously e-commerce has been a disrupt in itself because it's the development from brick and mortar to the digital world when it came to retail. But it has created massive synergies, obviously, and efficiency in the whole retail space. As of currently, we as Trendyol in Turkey, we have 250,000 sellers from all around Turkey, reaching 35 million customers. I mean, just to give you an example, every day we have 20 million people who do 50 million transactions. We ship 1 million packages. All this we can do with the technological development we've built, with the algorithms that we have in place, with artificial intelligence that we created that can measure consumer experiences, that can measure efficiency for our producers and sellers. The way we look at it, Metaverse is a potential to make this even more efficient in the future, because if consumers and our sellers can experience through the Metaverse, take, for example, clothing shopping. At the moment, even we say we're efficient, we still have 15 to 20% returns, because sometimes you order shirts, they don't fit you, you ask for something larger. If we can in the Metaverse establish where people, when they receive the shipping, get the exact size of the shirt or furniture in the house that fits exactly in the same corner of the room where they want it, these are massive efficiencies we can create, which will filter down the line for productivity efficiency for producers and sellers, and which will hopefully create also employment across the board, which is absolutely very right, because we need to make sure that productivity increases, trade increases, and supply chain increases through this as well. And for that, the more efficiency we can create between our consumers and our sellers, their metaverse will play an important role, we believe. And it has started, you see, globally now. Obviously, the technological infrastructure investment underneath it, moving on to 5G, the data processing that it needs is going to be very important. But the way I look at it, that hopefully will also be a tool to just make the whole production side and the supply side of the economy more efficient.
And you talk about the efficiency and the advantages of this of this technology, but how is the Trendyol Group going to confront its potential challenges? Are there any?
One is, as I've mentioned, the infrastructure. We do need more data. Obviously, this is a very data-driven, technology. So, as a country, we hopefully, Mr. Koç is working very hard on that, the development from 4G to 5G. But also now, as Trendyol, we're not just a Turkish company. We have huge ambitions for Europe and Middle East. We started opening our office in Berlin yesterday, and we have other expansions into Europe and Middle East this year planned. But some of these countries, for example, are already on 5G, and we're not. And the connectivity between country to country, when we want to show consumers in those countries our goods here, or vice versa, consumers here, the products there, we need to make sure that technological infrastructure is in place too. But again, what I said to earlier, hopefully through trade, that's why we're here as also a sponsor, diplomacy will advance. The more less barriers we have for trade, the more consumers, companies can trade with each other across these countries is also going to be huge benefit. So the integration in e-commerce, metaverse and e-commerce, we think will enable that going forward.
So I'm assuming it's in the plans of the Trendinol Group to enter the metaverse anytime soon?
Very time soon. Our engineers are developing the technologies to that as we speak. We have 2,000 engineers in Turkey. As Mr. Koç knows, he came to visit our center. And we have a dedicated team now that's exactly looking at now sort of the transformation from digitalization into metaverse. But this is not just for Trendyol, because what we've done, we have also helped the integration from all of the sellers that I just mentioned that we have on our platform, which are mainly small, medium enterprises all across the country, which didn't have the internet literacy, which didn't have the digitalization literacy. We've helped them, move that step from brick and mortar to digitalization to our platform. And it's also going to be our responsibility to help them get into the metaverse, how to adapt that technology into the metaverse. But we've shown that in the digital world with artificial intelligence, algorithm strengths we have, the data that we have, the guidance we've given them to establish themselves into the digital world has been very successful. So we also have to be responsible to be the bridge to move them into the metaverse world. That will be our responsibility.
Great.
With the help of Mr. Koç on the regulation side.
But we need to discuss about, are we going to stay in the real world, or are we going to go back and forth from real world to virtual world?
Yeah.
For
That's
example,
the question.
So if I have an avatar, I just want to buy a T-shirt from Gucci for my avatar, or I'm going to buy a Gucci T-shirt for myself. So
I think it has to be both.
I think it has to be both.
And that's how, I think it has to be both, because again, from a platform perspective, in fact, I think the first one, we have to make sure, again, there's more efficiency in the real world. We should and can use metaverse to create more efficiency in the real world. And then to have let's call it the parallel world, and verse, as we said, to have additional for consumers there, whatever they want to interact there, to buy products, exchange good live experiences. There's lots of great metaverse companies now developing in Turkey that even do time travel, like GoArt. Those experiences we can also parallel, sell to what we're doing in the real world. But we need to use technology also to make the real world more efficient.
Exactly. I guess the answer to your question depends on the extent you're going to live in the metaverse and how you want people to see your Gucci shirt while you're working or playing a video game.
I also, it's a very good point that it's raised, and I had the privilege of being a Google Glass Explorer, and the Google Glass is this razor-thin type of wearable, but it's one that when it came out in beta was about the size of this, and now the Google Glass is quite small. This will bring you into the metaverse right now, but I think ultimately it will be something that will look more like sunglasses. And so when that happens, and the great thing with the Google Glass experience, I could be walking with them and say, hey, Glass, and ask you a question, would have the information. Tell me more about that car, that beautiful Turkish car that's on the road there. Or I could wink and take a picture. And so I think we're going to see that we will.
But this again, switching back and forth.
Back and forth.
But when it becomes a wearable that you wear like you wear a pair of sunglasses, where you could remove the sunglass part on the Google Glass, we'll have that mixed reality all the time.
Reality.
I think that's the idea of like augmented reality, right? Where you can
Sure.
watch it as.
But currently, the hardware, we have still hardware limitations. All those glasses are not common everywhere. So it needs to be somehow regular glasses that everybody can buy and access. But then the other part becomes that these glasses needs to be connected, because it is not going to be, it needs to be like what happens is like a cell phones, right? At the beginning, the cell phones are so big and it's hard to carry. Right now, currently, everybody has their cell phones or laptops. So because they shrink and they become easy to use. So at the end of the day, people need to have these devices if they are easy to use. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to extend this metaverse environment.
Exactly, and I think that comes to the third point about more the society level of this tool, especially the concern about accessibility and to what extent are people going to be prone to use this technology, and it's accessible to everyone. You were mentioning 5G; it has to be available. So I don't know, maybe in Singapore, in Turkey, or in the U.S., Slovenia, how prone are citizens to use this technology or to integrate it into their daily life? I think that's what is the question here.
But again, I think it comes with you know, the more you use it, the more you get to. My father's 75, and he started using, you know, buying for e-commerce just now, you know. But now that he's used to it, you know, and now he's, you know, he puts on his glasses, gets on his phone, he can use it, he sticks to it. I think Metaverse will have the same development. The more people get used to it, the more it becomes easier to operate. You'll see more people adapting to it.
I think it goes back also to the use case. We spent some time talking about the metaverse. I think to the extent that it's able to recreate environments, it has, I think, very obvious applications in areas like education, simulation, training, and in Singapore, for instance, quite a number of our agencies, including the Ministry of Education, and also some of our agencies that are responsible for, say, law enforcement or safety and security, they have started to use technologies like this to engage in training where environments could be too dangerous to recreate or too costly to recreate. So I think those are the more obvious ones. But going forward, I think there are a lot of interesting areas that we can explore where perhaps for, you know, I'd be interested in, you know, what Mr. Chedin has mentioned just now. How can we help the elderly perhaps overcome some of the barriers that perhaps have been put in their place because perhaps of lack of education or perhaps there's a literacy gap. But in the metaverse, because of the way in which environments are recreated, it actually overcomes some of these gaps that make it harder for them to access public services in real life, and perhaps then they'll be able to access these services better. But I think for Singapore, our approach has always been to be more technology neutral. The metaverse is very exciting, and I think you know, many people are drawn to the fact that, you know, it creates a new world, and we're very eager to populate it with connections with the real world. I think in Singapore we take the approach where we want to solve real world problems. We look for where real world inefficiencies can be improved upon. And if we take a step back, I think it goes beyond metaverse. It includes AI, data analytics, robotics. How do we bring them all together to help improve the quality of life for our citizens in a brick and mortar setting? And then from there on, if we can build to something different, and what we'll do is, I think we take a sandbox approach. And of course, at the same time, we want to keep you know, in very close contact with our counterparts overseas to understand how that the thought leadership is developing and how that regulatory environment is developing. I thought I'd give a small example of things that we hope to do with AI, with robotics, with Internet of Things to improve the quality of life for our citizens. I have another portfolio besides foreign affairs. I also serve in the Ministry of National Development, and one of the key things that it looks after is public housing. More than 80% of Singapore's population live in public housing. That's high-rise public housing. It's a very dense living environment, and in that very dense, packed living environment, the provision of services is something that challenges us because of the constraints that I mentioned earlier, lack of manpower and so forth. And one of the things that we want to do is to be able to respond to feedback about public facilities maintenance. If lights are broken and need to be fixed, if pavements need to be fixed, if lifts are not working, how do we make sure that they are maintained to a very high standard or that problems are responded to very quickly? So I oversee the work of the Municipal Services Office, and we have a mobile app that collects all these kinds of feedback or complaints, if you will, daily from, by now, more than 400,000 users on the app. So every day we receive thousands of feedback, things that need to be done or seen to. And one of the things that we do is, because we've collected so much data, we want to make sure that that process, that efficiency of responding and then being able to move into predictive maintenance is there. And with that, we're now developing AI-powered chatbot so that people are able to respond. We won't be able to man the call centers necessary. We will not even be able to have enough people to read through all the submissions on the app. But people need to have that human touch. They want to know that their issues are being looked at and that there is empathy. And I think where we can marry some of these technologies together and help deliver that service to the public, I think very importantly, there will be greater support and acceptance. And people are also more willing to teach one another to get onto the service. And I think this applies equally, whether it is for mobile apps, whether it's the use of QR codes, whether it is the use of the metaverse. And I think having that successful use case build that support level amongst the public, different age groups, I think that's very critical to digital and technological adoption.
That's a very interesting point, Minister, because this whole idea of using artificial intelligence for e-government or public services, the so-called tech for good, I can imagine you're in agreement how this technology can improve society in the long term, at least through public services, and the idea of a chatbot to respond to public demands.
Sure, very much. I mean, it's very interesting to follow this discussion. However, I would like to stress from my point of view, from my role that I'm sitting here, is that when we are talking about technical development, the digitalization, etc., we know that when we are looking to the internet, for example, we're talking about the World Wide Web. So worldwide, what does that mean? Connectivity among the US, Singapore, China, developed countries. How many of the 8 billion people in the world have access to the internet? So it's not 50%. So we cannot talk about the World Wide Web, which is open and accessible, that you were questioning before. So here I would like to stress that we will have to have some responsibility if we would like not to live in a few years in a metaverse world and enjoy all profits out of that. And we know that AI and the development of AI has, yes, very positive impact on major parts of the society and the development, like health, like industries, like trade, like climate change, etc. We know that, but it has also really dangerous implications. It can be in military, it can be in regard to personal digital rights, etc. So we can see that how AI is used by, I don't know, autocratic states and democratic states. So it will be again a division, a divide in the world of this development. So here we have to see, and I was talking a few minutes ago when it was my turn, in African countries. I mean, I'm traveling a lot, usually not in COVID times, but before. And if I'm having a look at educational systems in really poor countries like Ethiopia or the Sudan or so, where you even do not have school rooms, schools, classes, or access to laptops or computers. Yes, on the other hand, now mobile phones are probably more accessible to people, and also in African countries you see that at least they run around with mobile phones with access to the internet. But here also richer countries, Slovenia, I would like to give only one outstanding example in regard to those open educational resources. It's not difficult to establish a satellite connectivity via mobile phones in order then to make available textbooks, study books, also, I mean, on virtual basis, accessible also to students, pupils in developing countries. I think this we need in this discussion also to stress. Of course, everything is important, what was said by yourself, and of course to prevent probably too much misuse. Also, metaverse will have this danger, I suppose, to be misused. We are in need about, really good governance about that, and probably some rules. A UNESCO recommendation about ethics and the use of AI. It's a recommendation. Every member state of UNESCO decides by itself if it will make use of these recommendations or not. Yeah. So they are not binding, legally not binding. However, they help to give a framework, and countries have to report back.
Completely.
By way of a word of encouragement, I'm actually a lawyer by profession. And when we sue, which sometimes we do, we ask what is the best standard of care? And if you've provided something that's not binding, and yet it is the best standard of care, I as a lawyer am going to ask, well, why wasn't that followed?
Yeah.
And this is where we need to have the public-private partnerships. I served as a mayor for 8 years. How do you get seniors to use a computer? Will you provide at the senior center classes in it? And I think it's great to hear our speakers here talk about the concern. Well, how do we bridge that divide? We've got to bridge the divide so that there's accessibility for everyone. And if we bridge that divide, it becomes a more exciting place because we get to have sessions like this where all of us get to wear and have that sense of presence.
And exactly, and that's what you were saying. A mobile phone, maybe it's a good start, but it's exactly what I was referring to for accessibility. I'm not going to go any longer because I'm checking the time. I want to let the audience participate. If you have any questions, could you please also state your name and your organization when you ask the question? Over there, yeah.
My name is Defna Sayman, and I'm from Özyeğin University. And my question is addressed to you all. So at the beginning, Mr. Glenn Gilmore has explained that how he met with the metaverse. He was put in a situation of a refugee in a truck, and I believe that it will help us to increase our empathy, and it will help us to adapt empathy in our policy making. But this is one way. On the other hand, Mr. Taha Koç said that it is expected for a regular person to spend about an hour in the metaverse. So I believe that it will also make us alienate from each other and our human selves and our human emotions and values. So my question is, which way will it go? Like in the policy making, will it go will we adopt more human values in policy because we adopt more empathy in it, or will we alienate from ourselves and each other?
Great question.
Great. Who wants to answer? Maybe partially, maybe.
Social media, I think, is a great example and a place of reference for us. Parents would tell children, stop looking at your phone. Now kids will tell their parents, stop looking at your phone. Has social media made us more empathetic? Well, it's brought the world, it's allowed everyone to have a voice in the world. I think the metaverse will have that opportunity, but there's always an opportunity for evil in the use of technology. We're seeing that horrifically here in the age we're in, not only in Ukraine, but other parts of the world. Big part of the world, and there's something terrible. We've got to make sure collectively that emerging technology becomes technology for good. And I'm hopeful that the metaverse will become ultimately a place for good.
I think the balance is the key word here, balance. You need to balance it out. You need to go to the extremes, not always increase your empathy.
Visit Turkey. Visit Turkey in real life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course. You need to, I don't know, everybody comes to Turkey with the VR glasses. You need to really feel the experience, right? So that's the reason that the balance is there. Maybe you're going to spend 1 hour for one person, is going to be too much, but maybe some people are going to have the same feeling or experience in 10 minutes. And some people, if you watch hours of refugees, maybe they're not going to feel the same empathy either. So that's the reason that there needs to be balance for each person. This is a universe. Everybody has their own avatar, so they're going to own decision about how much technology they want to use and how much good enough for them.
And I think e-commerce is even a good example for that. It's not like, now the technology in e-commerce is so developed, but it didn't stop people from shopping in brick and mortar. They still would like to go have the experience sometimes to try on a dress or, go out with their friends and just look around. So there is a balance. I think that's the right word that Mr. Koç said, that should establish itself. But, of course, against the dangers, I agree with you that we need to have the right rules and regulations in place, that we don't do the swing too much from the real world into the metaverse.
And of course, there's always like the Zoom fatigue, the metaverse fatigue, I'm assuming. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Two questions.
Yeah, we have a few. Can we try to make them short and sweet, please?
Hi, welcome. Can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Gamza. I'm from Antalya University. I study economics. I'm doing double major in political science and international relations and a minor in business administration. So I have two questions. First of all, moving on from what you have said, if I need to pop up. Right now, Verses are such platforms where people are just spending a few hours, but I feel like in the upcoming decades it will increasingly increase, and by the end maybe this will switch to become a reality. So in that sense, what do you think? Actually, I want to have your ideas. Will it become such an augmented reality in which the physical world and the digital world, the distinction between will become very blunt or not? And my second question is, in political science, one of the very few concepts we're learning is the relationship between state, society, and the companies. So what's the most essential element that brings and solidifies the relationship between these three agents is tax. But with e-commerce and all other branches moving to artificial intelligence and digital world, we see that the taxation system is not under threat, but is becoming also blur, because today we have US citizens who are working for the Turkish companies located in Turkey. So what do you think about this, about the taxation system on the base of the e-commerce and the business world moving to the digital life? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're going to cover mostly the second question.
Yeah, the first
because the
one
first was
yeah.
and also due to time constraints.
I think on tax I can maybe start, and then Taha can or you can. On the e-commerce side, taxation, actually to the contrary, when you do everything through the digitalization, where everything gets recorded, and by default tax leakage becomes impossible because everything gets properly transacted, and it's documented and there's data. Now, when we move on to the metaverse world, obviously that was one of my first points in the beginning. When people shop for their avatar, or when there's a production, digital production for their avatars, how that will be governed, I think there's a lot of work that the governments at the moment are thinking through how the taxation structure will be there. Because you're absolutely right, there's going to be an economy there, there's going to be spending there. How that gets taxed, that should be, I think, one of the regulations that will come in place. But I don't think the application should be that dissimilar the way it works in e-commerce at the moment.
But also what we need to think about is with the new technologies, we always think about what we have and we have to compare with the old technologies. For example, 19th century, when we first find the cars, it's called horseless carriage. Because at that point, everybody is using horses to carry stuff. So they call it horseless carriage. Then right now we get rid of the horses. Hopefully with the AI, we're going to get rid of the drivers as well. But hopefully it's not going to happen soon. But we need to think about it with the taxation perspective. These new technologies, we need to come up with the new structures. Maybe we're not going to call it tax, but we need to come up with the new structures to suit well with the new technology. Because taxation is for the old business style environment. Right now, this is totally new. And then for a totally new structure, we need a totally new regulation.
I'm just going to go into the two last questions. I think we have 5 more minutes. Okay. Over there.
Hi. First of all, I want to say thank you this very informative session. My question is related to humanitarian side of the artificial intelligence, actually. Since at the beginning of the session, we're talking about the things artificial intelligence and metaverse promising, but I want to ask something related to the point Mr. Hrestel made. What about the democratization of artificial intelligence and metaverse? Yes, artificial intelligence, new technology offers a lot to developed countries because they are able to invest in more and getting more developed and rich. But what about still developing world or the underdeveloped countries? Because if you ask me, I feel like this further developing might cause a deeper cleavage between developed and underdeveloped world. And I was asking how, to what extent possible to make the new technology more democratic and more reachable for people, because even the current pandemic we're experiencing shows us that how vulnerable people are still, even though we say that, yeah, the world is more developed, richer than before, but it doesn't hide the fact that there are still inequalities. So yeah, basically my question is, to what extent we can make artificial intelligence, metaverse, or other new technologies more democratic? Thank you.
Hard question.
I will try to somehow find a reply. Thank you for this question. I tried also to discuss this in my last point that I mentioned before, and on a global way, this could be probably a challenge which has to be tackled in the next. I mean, it cannot be solved in the next I don't know, few weeks, and will of course not hold the speed of the development of technologies if we are talking about to establish a system how to include all countries, especially the developing countries and the people living there, into the development of such technologies. But if I'm looking, for example, and now I would like just to talk on behalf of our International Research Center on AI, this, which provides a good, outstanding example how, for example, we can probably reply on such questions like you just posed, is that this research center last year tried to globally identify and asked with a call to identify to a list of top 100 solutions in the field of artificial intelligence, or how artificial intelligence can support the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. As we all know, one of those goals is also in the field of health, and in regard to the COVID disease, there's a really good example which is working now presently in 80 plus countries across Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, so also in many developing countries, not only rich developed countries, but it's there is a team from Asia, from China, which developed a AI model how to in the framework of X-rays for chest examinations. And through this AI model, the COVID virus could have been identified much faster than on traditional diagnosis ways. So this is one way, but if you are asking how we can democratize the globe, the world in the field of the development, this is difficult. I mean, probably there will be once some united, probably not nations, but some in a united meta-world or metaverse world, which could provide, with the help, of course, of the developed countries, with the funds of them, to make something like the development of AI, metaverse, etc., accessible to everybody in the world, hopefully, somewhere.
I fully agree, but it takes time, as you said.
This could be decades, of course.
And I'll just to give you one example on how e-commerce and digitalization developed. I mean, when we as Trendyol started 12 years ago, it was mainly Istanbul, right? But today in Turkey, we have 81 cities, and we are in 12 years now, we're in every city. We have 250,000 sellers. And when Mr. Koç, our technology minister, came to visit us, they asked us, they said, are you really in every city? We said, yes, we are. They asked, are you also in Hakkari, which is the poorest city, as we know, per GDP capita in Turkey? We said, yes, and we gave them a whole list of our sellers. They called even to check. So it takes time, but if you let technology, if you make it accessible, because right now, any seller in Turkey, as long as they raise their hand, want to be in our platform, they can. We help them to digitalize, we help them to get integrated. They can, but it takes time, as you said, and in this case, if you talk about globally, it will take decades. Yes. Yeah.
And probably in one sentence, which I was mentioning with the open educational resources, and if we say that already also many people in Africa now have a mobile phone which can be connected to satellite or to internet, and developed countries can make available textbooks and the technology that translates the textbooks in the respective languages. It's no problem, and this is a not very expensive way how this can be democratized also to poorer countries.
And if they have that smartphone with a 30-cent box, because if you do it at scale, they could enter the metaverse. And that's where the partnership of government and the private sector can help bridge that digital divide.
Yeah.
I'd like to also share that I think technology is values neutral. Humans set values. So if we're talking about democratization, I think actually this is really where there is a role for the public sector to be very actively involved in shaping the use of all these technologies. And I'd like to just sort of share two personal wishes of mine, things that, values that I hope we can promote through intelligent use of technology. One is to make virtue fun. I think technology that we've been talking about, Metaverse, AI, it has huge applications when it comes to gamification. But I think what we want to make fun are the things that are important to do, but in real life may not be that fun. And so make virtue fun. The other one, I think, is really to look after the little guys. Technology on its own, because of scalability, I think it has a tendency towards agglomeration and making players that are already big even bigger. That's a natural tendency. But I think if the government or the public sector chooses to use technology in a way that benefits, for instance, small or micro companies or SMEs, that can make a very real difference. I have a quick example. I talked about the public housing environment in Singapore. One of the things that we wanted to do is to make sure that there are enough shops within our public housing estates. But it's not possible to have every shop manned because we don't have enough people who want to run shops. But if we let the private sector do unmanned shops, it's very likely, first, maybe there won't be very many of such shops because it's difficult to overcome the logistics challenges, or they may all go towards specific large chains. But we in Singapore embarked on a small experiment to help the mom and pop shops, the sole proprietor, really small provision shops, make use of vending machines that can essentially serve as unmanned points of sales and put them at strategic places, locations around the radius of one shop. And what this does is it actually solves one of the problems that we've had. We want to digitalize small businesses, but usually we ask them to become web businesses. But I'm sure Trendio will agree, not everybody is destined to become a web business. But are there technologies, AI, Internet of Things, that allow smaller players to do better and sell more and serve more customers and also provide better coverage for residents without having to turn everybody into a web business? I think it's entirely possible, but that value has to be there first, which is how do we look for technologies that precisely advantage the little guy? And I think that those are values that are set by humans, and I think that's something that regulators can bring into the equation.
Exactly. I'm going to conclude there. I think we can all agree that this is a fascinating topic, a huge topic to cover in way over an hour. And yeah, I think we can all agree that all we need is time, public and private collaboration, and most importantly, that it's human-centered all the way. Thank you for being here today.